Muhammad's marriage to a 6-year-old girl is one topic that has driven many people from Islam. He really did it, and that is a real problem for Muslims. Who is Aisha? Well, with me here, our dear brother David Wood, that we, myself and him, will begin to unpack the story and the connection between a woman, a young woman, if I may add, named Aisha, and the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, because this story, once you have collected all the facts and you have examined all the sources, especially Islamic sources, about the connection between the two and the relationship between the two, I think you are going to find it to be very disturbing. So today we are going to talk about what's the problem in this particular relationship or story. David, welcome.
Yeah, you're very generous in calling her a young woman. Very, very generous, and that is Muslims in general would appreciate you calling her a young woman. They would appreciate us not calling Muhammad names like pedophile and things like that. But interestingly, this is an issue that bothers lots of Muslims. And what Christians need to realize when they're talking to Muslims is sometimes something is bothering their Muslim friends, even though the Muslim will not acknowledge that it's bothering them. And I found this out with my friend Nabil way back in the day, because I would be going through the Muslim sources and bringing up all kinds of issues to him. How could Muhammad do this? How could Muhammad do that? How could Muhammad do this? And he never showed that he was bothered by these issues until after he became a Christian. That's when he told me that certain things were really, really bothering him, even though he wasn't acknowledging it. So the thing that he said really, really bothered him was the issue of taking women and girls as sex slaves after a battle. And he said, I was just thinking, if this were my mother or my sister or something like this, is that something that God's going to say is okay? But I remember when I brought it up to him, he acted like this was no problem at all. And yet later he admitted it was really bothering him. And this is the issue of Muhammad and Aisha is one of those issues where people who have left Islam, lots of them will say, that this was something that really started bothering them, Muhammad and Aisha. So for anyone who happens to be new to this, the idea here is that according to Islam's most trusted sources, and in our other videos in this series, we'll be going into more detail, looking at the sources more closely. But according to Islam's most trusted sources, Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, had sex with a 9-year-old girl. He married her when she was 6 or 7. He consummated the marriage when she was 9. And the main issue here is that Muhammad, as you know, is the pattern of conduct for Muslims. Right. And so the man who serves as the general pattern of conduct, the person you are supposed to emulate and imitate in Islam, had sex with a 9-year-old girl. And Muslims try to imitate Muhammad in every way possible, like up to and including how they go to the bathroom. They're trying to imitate Muhammad in every aspect of life. And then we find out that their ideal pattern of conduct had sex with a girl who was 9 years old. And this has led to ongoing problems in the Muslim world, because there are places in the Muslim world where either they won't make laws against having sex with, a young girl. I mean, marrying and consummating the marriage with a young girl who's 8 or 9 years old, or even if they make a rule or make a law, they don't really enforce it, because you just can't go around enforcing a law where people are going to be in an uproar, because by charging someone with a crime over this, you'd actually be insulting Muhammad. But just to show everyone what we mean, let's just read one passage. Let's go ahead and read one passage from the Muslim sources. We'll be reading more later on, but this is from Sahih al-Bukhari, It's number 5153, but right before Sahih al-Bukhari 5153, we have a chapter heading, and it gives a little background as to how this hadith is being used. So notice the chapter heading. This is Islam's most trusted source on the life and teachings of Muhammad. The title of the chapter is Giving One's Young Children in Marriage is Permissible. You say, why is it permissible? He says, by virtue of the statement of Allah, and for those who have no monthly courses, i.e. they are still immature, that's Surah 65, verse 4 of the Quran. And according to Surah 65, verse 4, which we'll be looking at in another video more closely, a Muslim man can marry, have sex with, and divorce a girl all before she's reached the age of puberty, and pass her on to another man who can marry her, have sex with her, and divorce her all before she's reached the age of puberty. This is in the Quran. And then we see, and the iddah, that's a waiting period when you've divorced a girl after having sex with her. And the iddah for the girl before puberty is 3 months in the above verse. And what that's actually saying is that if you marry a girl who hasn't reached puberty and you have sex with her and you decide to divorce her, she has to wait 3 months before she can get married again. So that's the iddah, the waiting period. And then in order to give an example of this, we have Sahih al-Bukhari 5133, narrated Aisha that the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years, i.e. till his death. So here you have, all in one, you have the Quran allowing sex with girls who haven't even reached puberty and saying, therefore, it's okay. It's okay to give your little children to someone in marriage, even if they haven't reached puberty. And the example they give, apart from quoting the Quran where Allah says it's fine, the example they give is Muhammad, right, doing this with Aisha. And so you can see why this would bother Muslims and why it should bother Muslims. If the pattern of conduct that you're saying that is the ideal pattern of conduct for human beings to imitate in every way, had sex with a little girl, and he's the example, and this is leading to all kinds of problems in the world today, you can see why this would be a problem. And just in case people don't understand why this is such a problem, a girl who hasn't reached puberty, or even a girl who has reached puberty but her body hasn't fully matured, and that's a lot of things, that's something that many Muslim apologists don't understand. They'll try to argue that Aisha had reached puberty. We're going to see that their arguments there are wrong. But they try to argue that Aisha had reached puberty and therefore it was okay for Muhammad to have sex with her. What they don't realize is that puberty is a process. When a girl gets her first period, when she reaches menstruation, that is a sign that she has started puberty. But puberty is a process that takes a few years, during which a woman matures from a girl into a fully mature woman. And this takes time. Her breasts develop, her hips widen, her birth canal widens. And so the idea that, you can rush in to have sex with a girl who hasn't completed puberty is dangerous. I mean, we can look at previous generations and say, well, maybe they didn't know any better and so on. But the idea is that now we know it's not a good idea to rush in to have sex with a girl who's just reached puberty because her body hasn't fully transitioned into adulthood. But it's even more dangerous, significantly more dangerous, to start having sex with a girl who hasn't reached puberty because then her hips definitely haven't widened. If you're having sex with her and all of a sudden she's capable of reproduction and she gets pregnant immediately before her body has started to more fully develop, before her hips have widened, before her birth canal has widened, let me just list some of the problems. Rates of toxemia, sepsis, obstructed and prolonged labor, hemorrhaging, and fistulas all increase significantly for very young mothers. So there are all sorts of medical problems, both for the baby and for the mother, if girls that young become pregnant. And so the idea that the greatest pattern of conduct that we have is setting the example of doing something that is very dangerous for little girls. And he's setting the pattern of conduct for billions of people over the centuries. We can see why we've got a problem here. So it makes sense for Muslims to be bothered by this and disturbed by this, and definitely makes sense for non-Muslims to look at this and say, wait a minute, if this man is supposedly the pattern of conduct for humanity according to your God and according to the revelation that he delivered, we've got a reason not to trust that revelation. We've got a reason to say, hey, this doesn't look like it's something from God. Why would God be affirming that you're going to have sex with prepubescent girls and then giving as his pattern of conduct a man like Muhammad who had sex with a little girl and who justified it by saying that he'd gotten a vision, right? He said he had a dream where Allah was giving Aisha to him. Now, I don't know about you, Al, but if I had a dream where someone was giving me a 6-year-old girl, I would not think that was God. I would not think it was God giving me that dream. I would want to go see a psychiatrist. But Muhammad concludes, oh, God's giving me that little girl.
And also, there is different ways to interpret that God is giving you a little girl. What if God is giving you a little girl in a dream, meaning you can say, oh, maybe I need to have a child of my own. Maybe I need to adopt a child. Why think immediately of sex like Muhammad? He always thought of things like this. And it makes you wonder, really, because if this is acceptable, you would find it widespread in the Muslim world, for instance, but it's no. There are families, Muslim families, that are not going to accept the idea that you're an old man marrying my young daughter. And even if we bring Muhammad, they'll always try to justify it and say, well, he's a prophet, he's special. They always try to weasel their way out of it for the right reasons. You can't really blame them for being embarrassed by something like this. Mm-hmm. So everybody, hopefully you can see why this series is going to be important. Throughout this series, we're going to talk about one topic at a time, and we'll deal even with objections and ways to respond to these objections. But the main thing that I want to point out to you is that David is using Islamic sources, as you can see. They have the Arabic and the English, and my job here is to assure you that I will correspond with David about the Arabic, and this is why he and I are working on this, so that no one is claiming that, well, David doesn't speak Arabic, or David is not an Arab, or David was... It doesn't work that way. Our point here is not to attack the Arabic. Our point here is to raise the flag about a practice that is absolutely disgusting, to say the least. So hopefully everyone will be watching this series, and also we encourage you to share it with others, because in the story of my own wife, she came to Christ because of this story when people began to point it out to her. Even though she did not show signs of being disturbed, she was troubled by it, and later confessed that it was definitely troublesome to her to know that her prophet did something like this. Thank you, David. Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone. Until next time, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. We agree with Sheikh Yasir Qadi when he says Muhammad married a little girl and Muslims shouldn't lie about it. The early Islamic sources prove it. Come and see. Last time we talked about the problem of the marriage of an old man, Muhammad, to a young girl who was basically 9 years old, according to Islamic sources, when the marriage was consummated. So, with that in mind, we're going to ask the question today, was Aisha really 9 years old? David? What say you?
I say yes. And I say yes, she was 9 years old, because that is the uniform testimony of Islam's most trusted sources. There is a reference in Ibn Hisham, who says that she was 10, but that's a source that Muslims tell us not to trust. And so when you go to the sources that they do tell us to trust, they tell us to trust Sahih al-Bukhari,
Right.
they tell us to trust Sahih Muslim, they tell us to trust Sunan Abu Dawud and Sunan an-Nasai and so on. And these sources say over and over and over again that she was 9 years old when Muhammad consummated the marriage with her. So that's when Muhammad actually had sex with Aisha. You do see some difference. You do see some difference between 6 or 7 when the marriage contract was written, or when they were actually married. But when it says that Muhammad consummated the marriage, across the board they say she was 9 years old. And some have pointed out that there's not really a conflict between 6 or 7 if they're like arranging the marriage and so on, you know, as she's going from 6 to 7, and it starts at one point and continues to until she's 7. But we also know from experience sometimes you might not remember the difference between when you were 6 or 7. There are things I can remember where I don't, you know, I'm thinking, was I 6 then or was I 7 then? And where we're really clear is when we have some reference point. Like, I remember I was 6 years old and my dad was in the military, had gotten into the military, and I ended up taking a trip when I was 6 years old. So anything that happened on that trip, I remember I was 6 years old. Apart from that, you know, like I had a dog died, I don't remember if I was 5 or 6 or what the situation was. And so we can understand why there would be, you know, an issue between 6 or 7 or something like that. It seems that Aisha did have a reference point. This wasn't long after the migration to Medina, so she seems to have been very clear on the fact that this was when she was 9 years old. But what we find is lots of Muslims insist that Aisha was older. They'll say she was 16 or 18 or 19. They'll tell us that the one just dropped off of the number somehow. Does that work in Arabic? Like the one in 19 just fell off.
They're using like the scribal argument now in the Old Testament, New Testament.
Yeah, it's got to be something like that, right? But notice, if you wanted to dispute between 6 and 7, okay, that makes some sense. There is nothing in my life that I would confuse from between when I was 9 and when I was 19. There's a very big difference between 9 and 19 in my life. So there's no way I'm going to be confused about that. So when we look to the Muslim sources and we see over and over and over again that Aisha was 9 years old, and we never see anything saying that she was 18 or 19 or anything like that, the only reason to say she's older is to just not want to believe that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl.
Right.
So we're going to go ahead and read a few of the Muslim sources to see what we're talking about here, just for people who've never read them before. So let's go ahead and read Sahih al-Bukhari. And Sahih al-Bukhari, we read this in our first video. But you have the chapter introduction there, which is giving one's young children in marriage is permissible. So it's clear what this is talking about. This is talking about marrying young children. I mean, their words, not ours, young children. And so we read Sahih al-Bukhari 5133, narrated Aisha that the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years, i.e., till his death. So there you have a little timeline. 6 years old, then she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years. So this is Bukhari. We'll read one more from Sahih al-Bukhari, just because that's their favorite source. This is number 5158. Narrated Urwa, the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with Aisha while she was 6 years old and consummated his marriage with her while she was 9 years old, and she remained with him for 9 years, i.e., till his death. So those are both in Sahih al-Bukhari, and there are more in Sahih al-Bukhari, but let's go on to Sahih Muslim. So this is from Sahih Muslim, number 3311. Aisha reported that Allah's apostle married her when she was 7 years old, and he was, that's a typo, and she was taken to his house as a bride when she was 9, and her dolls were with her. And when he, the Holy Prophet, died, she was 18 years old. So now we have even more of a timeline. We've got she was 6, and then she was 9, and then she stayed with him for 9 years, and she was 18. So they can't be more clear.
That's right. You cannot tell me the 19, the one dropped. Well, he died when she was 18. So where is the 19 coming from?
Yeah, so it's pretty clear what the Muslim sources are saying. It's pretty clear what the early companions of Muhammad and Aisha herself are saying. They're saying that she was 9 years old when Muhammad had sex with her. All right, so that's Sahih Muslim. Now let's go on to Sunan Abu Dawud. So this is Sunan Abu Dawud, number 2116 or number 2121, depending on which edition you're using. Narrated Aisha, the Messenger of Allah married me when I was 7 years old. The narrator Suleiman said, or 6 years. He had intercourse with me when I was 9 years old. So it doesn't matter where we go, we see the same thing. And let's go ahead and read one more. So this is Sunan an-Nasai, number 3380. It was narrated that Aisha said, the Messenger of Allah married me when I was 6 and consummated the marriage with me when I was 9, and I used to play with dolls. So the Muslim sources really can't make it any clearer. And by the way, all I did was pick a couple of examples there from their most trusted sources. In these sources, there are more references. There are more references in Bukhari. There are more references in Muslim. There are more references in Abu Dawud. There are more references in An-Nasai about Aisha being 9 years old. That was just a sampling. I do want to give a sort of summary statement from Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir, certainly one of the greatest, most respected Muslim scholars of all time.
And he's a Salafi, and he's a student of Ibn Taymiyyah.
And he wrote a 4-volume biography of Muhammad. So he wrote his own seerah. And he gives an interesting summary when he's talking about this issue. So in his 4-volume biography, Ibn Kathir quotes Urwa ibn az-Zubair, so that's Aisha's nephew, who says that Aisha was 9 years old when Muhammad consummated his marriage with her. Then, after quoting Urwa on the age of Aisha, so he quotes Urwa saying that Aisha was 9, that's Aisha's nephew who said it. After quoting Urwa, Ibn Kathir says this, his statement, he contracted marriage with Aisha when she was 6, thereafter consummating marriage with her when she was 9, is not disputed by anyone and is well established in the Sahih collections of traditions and elsewhere. So this is Ibn Kathir, one of the greatest Muslim scholars of all time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, Ibn Kathir confirming something that happened in the 7th century, because he was in the 13th century. Look at the time span, and he's still affirming the same thing that you just shared.
And he's affirming, and so what Ibn Kathir would do is when there was dispute on an issue, he would say, but this scholar says this, and this scholar says that, and this companion says this, and this companion says that. And here he's just saying, there's no dispute on this issue. And so when Muslims today dispute the age of Aisha, we need to be clear on the fact that, hey, this is a modern, you rejecting this is a modern idea. It doesn't go back to your Muslim scholars. And fortunately, there are Muslim scholars who try to be honest about this, at least. And so let me read a quotation from a talk from Sheikh Yasser Qadhi. So Sheikh Yasser Qadhi.
Let's take a deep dive.
Yeah, deep dive, holes in the narrative, right? Does not like me, said some very nasty things about me. But on this issue, we'll give credit where credit is due. He did speak honestly about this. And he said to Muslims who want to misrepresent the age of Aisha in order to keep people from criticizing Muhammad, he said, "O Muslims, don't apologize for the truth and don't distort the truth. There are Muslims that tried to deny this. Oh, he didn't marry Aisha as a young girl. Yahi, look, that's not the way forward. We don't lie for the sake of our religion. Astaghfirullah. We have the truth. We're not going to cover up the truth if people find it embarrassing. This is the reality. Deal with it. Our Prophet married a young girl and it was fine for the time." So this is Sheikh Yasser Qadhi. And notice he says, don't lie for the truth.
Exactly.
He's calling other Muslims who say, no, she was 18, she was 19. He's calling them liars.
And Yasir Qadhi himself did a lecture one time about the marriage of Muhammad to the wife, Zainab, the wife of his adopted son. And he used the same language. He's like, why do we have to hide it? He's a human being. Yes, he lusted after her. So what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, fortunately, we have some examples of honesty like this. But I mean, think about this. All across the Muslim sources, she was 9 years old. Ibn Kathir says, no one disputes this. Down to his time, no one's disputing this. No scholars dispute this. Suddenly we get to our modern age and Muslims realize that it's wrong. So Muhammad couldn't have done that. So they want to start saying that she must have been older. And then Muslim scholars who don't want Muslims to leave Islam over this issue start telling them, oh yes, she was older. She was 18. Maybe she was 19. They start telling Muslims that in order to keep them from leaving Islam. And then you've got people like Sheikh Yasir Qadhi saying, guys, you can't be lying to keep people in Islam. We can't lie to keep people in Islam. So anyway, the point is, any honest look at the evidence, we have a ton of evidence that she was 9 years old. We have no evidence that she was older. And so very clear, Muslims, I agree with, on this at least, I agree with Sheikh Yasir Qadhi. Stop lying. Stop lying and saying that she was older than 9.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, David. And hopefully everyone is enjoying these, subtopics under this big umbrella about Aisha and Muhammad. As you can see, this is a worthy topic to be mentioned simply because sometimes Muslims either are repeating what they were told or they don't even know about the rest of the story when it comes to that. And I guarantee you some even haven't even heard the story before. And I know of examples of this as well. So whatever the case might be, we're giving you tools here, not to go and beat up Muslims with it, but the idea is to, if it is worthy to be discussed, use it wisely. We have given you already the Islamic resources and the sources that you could quote and could also refer your Muslim friends to it. And if you are a Muslim watching this, we hope that you are benefiting a great deal from the fact that we are sharing with you something that you should be disturbed about, just like the rest of us. Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. This is Al-Fadi. God bless you. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Had Aisha reached puberty when the Prophet of Islam had sex with her? The answer is no. Aisha was still young enough to play with dolls when Muhammad took her to his marriage bed. So far we've covered a number of topics, and I'm sure if you've watched them, you'll find them to be very disturbing. And the question that we are going to ask, not just ourselves, but ask even you as viewers to wrestle with, is the claim that Aisha basically was at the age of puberty or reached the age of puberty when this consummation of marriage happened. So the question is, had Aisha reached puberty? And of course, with me here in studio is our dear brother, Dr. David Wood, to answer this question. David, you hear this all the time. Aisha, was young, but she reached the age of puberty, as if that's a justification for the consummation of the marriage.
Yeah, here we could do what's called an even if, but in fact response. That's where you say, even if you were correct, then it's still a problem. But in fact, you're wrong, right? So here we could say, even if Aisha had reached puberty, it would still be a problem, because just because a girl reaches the age of puberty doesn't mean that it's a good idea to start having sex with her. It's a good idea to wait until she has finished puberty, i.e. wait until she has the body of a grown woman, because that's when it's far safer for the girl to start having children. So even if Muhammad had waited until Aisha reached puberty, it would still not be a good idea if she was only 9 years old. But in fact, according to the Muslim sources, she hadn't reached puberty. And so what we really find from Muslims is, what we talked about previously, is that the Muslim sources say over and over again, like a beating drum, that she was 9 years old when Muhammad consummated the marriage with her. And the reason we go through the Muslim sources to show that is Muslims who are embarrassed about this want to deny, first of all, that she was 9. No, she was much older. And so once you prove conclusively that she was 9 years old when Muhammad consummated the marriage, then they want to change the response to, oh, okay, she was 9, but she had reached puberty. And so they're really looking for different ways to justify what Muhammad did. But we're going to read a few Muslim sources, and there are issues you can go into a lot more depth, a lot more detail. But we're just going to give a simple reason, according to the Muslim sources, and according to the greatest hadith scholar of all time, for concluding that Aisha had not reached puberty when Muhammad had sex with her. So let's go ahead and read a couple of sources. One, just a simple passage to start off, just saying that she was 6 years old when she was married, and then 9 when the marriage was consummated. So Sahih al-Bukhari 5158 narrated Urwa, the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with Aisha while she was 6 years old, and consummated his marriage with her while she was 9 years old, and she remained with him for 9 years, i.e. till his death. So most of the passages on the age of Aisha are like this. They give the age of the marriage, they give the age when he consummated the marriage, and some of them give the timeline of when, how old she was when he died. So this is where Muslims will look at passages like this and say, aha, yes, it says she was 9, but she had reached puberty. And the basis for this is their thought that, well, he married her when she was 6 and consummated when she was 9, so he must have been waiting for something. What was he waiting for? Aha, he was obviously waiting until she reached puberty. Not so fast. There's more to it than this. So let's go ahead and read another passage. Sahih al-Bukhari. And here we have some interesting added commentary from Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, considered by many to be the greatest hadith scholar of all time.
That's right.
Sahih al-Bukhari, number 6130, narrated Aisha, I used to play with the dolls in the presence of the Prophet, and my girlfriends also used to play with me. When Allah's messenger used to enter my dwelling place, they used to hide themselves, but the Prophet would call them to join and play with me. So just to recap here, Aisha would be playing with dolls, and her friends would be playing with dolls with her, and then Muhammad would be there, and so her friends would try to hide. They don't want to be playing with dolls when Muhammad is there, and he would say, no, come back and play with the dolls with Aisha. Now, there's a problem here. There's a problem, and the problem is that if you're a Muslim, you're not supposed to be playing with dolls. Dolls are considered images, and you're not allowed to have images. So why was Aisha allowed to play with dolls in the presence of Muhammad? And why were her friends allowed to play with dolls, which are images, according to Islam? So they're forbidden. You're not allowed to play with images. Why were they allowed to do this? And we have the answer right here in the same passage. We have the commentary from Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Notice he says, the playing with dolls and similar images is forbidden, but it was allowed for Aisha at that time, as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty.
And this is Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, who did commentaries on Sahih Bukhari, basically.
Yeah, so they include, the reason they include that there is because any Muslim who's reading that will go, what? Why is she playing with dolls when images are forbidden? So they include that to solve the mystery. Little girls were allowed to play with dolls. It's once you reach the age of puberty, that was considered the age of moral accountability, where you're responsible for your actions. And since she hadn't reached puberty, she was allowed to continue playing with dolls. So the rule in Islam isn't that you can never play with dolls. The rule is once you reach the age of puberty, you have to stop playing with dolls. But notice, Aisha and her friends are still playing with dolls in Muhammad's presence. What does that mean? Well, according to the greatest hadith scholar of all time, it means she and her friends had not reached puberty. They were still little girls. Now, the objection I've seen Muslims raise here is, well, maybe this is talking about some earlier stage
yes.
when Aisha was much younger. But notice we've got a problem here. Let's go back to a passage from Sahih Muslim that we read in a previous video. So this is Sahih Muslim 3311. Aisha reported that Allah's apostle married her when she was 7 years old, and she was taken to his house as a bride when she was 9, and her dolls were with her. And when he, the Holy Prophet, died, she was 18 years old. So she was still playing with dolls. She still had dolls. She still brought dolls to Muhammad's house. This isn't talking about something 3 or 4 or 5 years earlier. Aisha was still playing with dolls with her friends in the presence of Muhammad after the marriage had been consummated. What does that mean according to Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani? It means she hadn't reached puberty. That's the explanation according to Islam. You're not allowed to play with dolls once you've reached puberty. Aisha was still playing with dolls. She was still playing with dolls when she was brought to Muhammad to consummate the marriage. What do you do? Why was she allowed to continue playing? Because she hadn't reached puberty. That's the conclusion. And you can see why this makes sense of other passages in Sahih al-Bukhari. So let's go ahead and read one more, which we've read previously, but notice how all of this ties together. So we'll read the chapter heading here. Giving one's young children in marriage is permissible. So this chapter is about giving children in marriage and saying it's okay. And you have two reasons. One, it says, by virtue of the statement of Allah, and for those who have no monthly courses, so no monthly menstrual cycle, i.e. they are still immature, Surah 65, verse 4. This is talking about marrying and divorcing girls who have no monthly period because they are immature. They do not, they haven't reached the age of puberty. It says the iddah for the girl, the iddah is the waiting period after you've divorced her. The iddah for the girl before puberty is 3 months in the above verse. So this is Imam Bukhari commenting on the Quran saying that you can divorce a girl and that she has to wait 3 months after you divorced her before she can marry again. And it specifically says it's a girl who hasn't reached puberty. It's before puberty. And then as the other example besides the Quran saying it, Bukhari gives Sahih al-Bukhari 5133, narrated Aisha that the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years, i.e. till his death.
Yes.
And so what we find is that saying, hey, my dolls were with me, or saying her dolls were with her, is kind of a slang for saying she was still prepubescent. That's what they're saying. Like of all the things you could bring up, why are they bringing up, oh, and her dolls are with her? Like, I mean, her blanket was with her. Why are you pointing out the dolls? Because it's the point being made is that she had not reached puberty, and that's why she was still playing with dolls. And so the Muslim sources are telling us that Aisha had not reached puberty.
Exactly. I mean, you wonder, why are they insistent to mention things like this, the dolls, right? And taking the dolls with her, playing with her friends with dolls, her age, specifically how long he lived with her. And of course, you and I know that even some Muslims will say, oh, it's a miracle from God that he married someone this young, and she stayed with him for that long, because look what happened. God used her later to narrate hadith and teach and so on and so forth. So you have both sides of the aisle, and it depends on the time of day, I guess, how they're going to respond to this argument. So thank you again. This is powerful. Hopefully everyone is enjoying this. Well, if you think this is disturbing, if you think this is powerful, wait until you see the rest of the subtitles and the rest of the subtopics that we are going to be covering in relationship to this particular important topic known as Aisha and Muhammad. Thank you, brother. Thank you, everyone. This is Al-Fadi. God bless you. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Muslims claim that the English translations of the hadith say Aisha had reached puberty when Muhammad married her, but it's not true. In the original Arabic, the evidence is just not there. I know you brought up to my attention a couple of hadith that it appears to you that there is some discrepancy in those sources compared to what we have covered so far.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm a little confused here. I'm looking at these hadiths and they'll say something about Aisha menstruating or reaching puberty, but then I'll see some problems in various translations. So since you know the Arabic, maybe you can solve this mystery for me. So let's go ahead and look at a passage here. And so this passage is used by Muslims around the world to show that Aisha had, in fact, reached the age of puberty. This is Sunan Abu Dawud, number 4933 or 4915, depending on which edition you're using. We have narrated Aisha, "The Messenger of Allah married me when I was 7 or 6. When we came to Medina, some women came, according to Bishr's version. Ruman came to me when I was swinging. They took me, made me prepared, and decorated me." So this is when she's being brought to Muhammad to consummate the marriage. "I was then brought to the Messenger of Allah, and he took up cohabitation with me when I was 9. She halted me at the door, and I burst into laughter." Abu Dawud said, that is to say, I menstruated, and I was brought in a house, and there were some women of the Ansari in it. So here you have, in this English translation of Sunan Abu Dawud, it says that Aisha had started menstruating when she's being taken to Muhammad's house. But here's where I'm a little confused. I go to the same exact hadith in the Darussalam edition, and let's take a look at that. So here is the same hadith in the Darussalam edition of Sunan Abu Dawud, number 4933. And I'll go ahead and read. "It was narrated that Aisha said, 'The Messenger of Allah married me when I was 7 or 6 years old. When we came to Al-Madinah, some women,' Bishr said, Ruman, came to me when I was on a swing and took me and prepared me and adorned me. Then I was brought to the Messenger of Allah, and he consummated the marriage with me when I was 9 years old. She made me stand at the door, and I started to breathe deeply. Then I was brought to a room where there were some of the Ansari and so on." But here, there's not one word about Aisha menstruating. So since you have the Arabic in front of you, could you tell us what's being translated as menstruated here and show that Aisha had, in fact, menstruated, just as Muslims claim when they're trying to defend their prophet?
There isn't a single word for menstruation here in Arabic in both examples, actually. I'm not even so sure why it was translated that way in the first example. It's the same hadith, or at least for the most part. And in fact, the words of Abu Dawud down at the bottom in the first one were translated as if he was saying that she menstruated. That's not true. The second hadith actually said the truth, which is she was breathing, or maybe breathing hard, kind of like anxious, if you wish. And that was it. So there is no mention of menstruation or reaching an age of menstruation. It's just talking about her age. Whether 9 means menstruation, I don't think so. Not everybody, not all the girls will reach that age at age 9. Some of them could be 8, some of them could be 11. So I'm not really so sure where the English translators get this idea from.
So what you're saying is that the English translation that says she menstruated has no basis in the Arabic.
No, if we rely on Arabic only, no.
And what we have is, this one says breathing heavily, the other one says that she laughed, and somehow they're interpreting this having something to do with menstruating, like, oh, I laughed or started breathing heavily because I started menstruating, when it's more like in the context, it's, hey, I'm being taken to a guy's house for him to have sex with me, and that's why I started breathing heavily. So
it's a miracle, really, if she menstruated right before
right
entering
then.
the house.
It's convenient. She's on her way to the house, and she just.
Yeah.
And by the way, should he start having sex with her right then if she just
That's
started
a whole different story.
Yeah.
When it comes to Muhammad, all things are possible.
Yeah, so all the Muslims who are using this passage to show that Aisha had reached menstruation, you're using a mistranslation. Show us what it says in the Arabic if you want to defend your claim. But there's one more. There's one more that Muslims use, and this one is from Sahih al-Bukhari. And it's similar, but this one specifically says that Aisha had reached puberty. So this is Sahih al-Bukhari, number 476, and I'll go ahead and read a couple of passages here, and then you can clear up my confusion. Matter of fact, I'll probably have you comment on this one, and then we'll read some other examples of the of other translations. So Sahih al-Bukhari, number 476, narrated Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, I had seen my parents following Islam since I attained the age of puberty. Not a day passed, but the Prophet visited us both in the mornings and evenings. And so Aisha's giving a reference, a time frame here, that her parents have been following Islam since she reached the age of puberty, but we have a good idea of when Abu Bakr started following Islam. So if Aisha had reached puberty by then she was long past the age of puberty when Muhammad consummated the marriage with her. So as long as that's actually what it says in the Arabic, and the Arabic is clear that she had reached puberty, Muslims have a good argument. It'll be inconsistent with some other things we read in the hadiths, but at least they'll have this to say that Aisha had reached puberty. So is that what it says in the Arabic?
Not at all. She's saying the word that they're trying to translate as reaching the age of puberty, actually she's saying, I can remember that, or at least from the time I began to recall memory, I remember that my parents were actually following the religion of Islam. In other words, she did not experience polytheism or idolatry in her life, basically, because her parents were already converts to Islam. Mm-hmm. That's what she's saying.
So she's not saying, hey, from the time when I reached puberty, that's when my parents began following Islam. She's saying, as long as I can remember.
That's right.
Back to when I can start remember things, my parents were already following Islam.
Exactly.
Now, I don't know about you, but I can remember lots of things before I reached puberty. I have memories from years before I reached puberty. But here's what's interesting. So that's Sahih al-Bukhari, number 476. That's the most common translation, but we also have the same hadith translated by Aisha Bewley. Let's read her translation, and we'll see if she agrees with you or if she agrees with the translation we just read. So this is Aisha Bewley's translation of the same hadith. It is related that Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, said, I have no recollection of my parents doing anything but following the deen of Islam. So here, Aisha Bewley translates this as, I just don't remember anything except my parents following Islam. So nothing about puberty. She's just saying my parents have followed Islam as long as I can remember. But notice, this means that Aisha doesn't even have memory. She must have been very young because she doesn't remember anything before her parents are following Islam. So she would have been very young. And in fact, let's go ahead and take a look at one more passage. The reason this is interesting is because it gives the same beginning of this story in this hadith, and yet they don't translate it as having reached puberty, even though they're talking, it seems like it's talking about the same thing. So this is Sahih al-Bukhari, number 2297. Narrated Aisha, wife of the Prophet, since I reached the age when I could remember things, I have seen my parents worshiping according to the right faith of Islam. So they're giving completely different translations. One is talking about puberty, in two passages which they sound like they're talking about the same thing. So in the Arabic, is this actually the similar to the other passage?
Yes. And Aisha Bewley's translation is, correct. And also this one is correct in capturing what is the meaning behind that particular word, aqil. You know, that's the word, meaning like recall, or at least my memory began to work in a way that I can recall things, technically speaking. So, but either way, whether you agree remembering things before or remembering things starting from there, it still has nothing to do with puberty.
Nothing to do with puberty, and yet there are Muslims around the world using this to show that Aisha had reached puberty, and it's a total mistranslation. It's not what the word means. I'm going to show you why on this last quotation why this is so bothersome. If a regular Muslim says, "Oh, I think it means that she reached puberty because that's what I've been told," that's one thing. But notice what we have here. This is from an article from the Yaqeen Institute. It's written by Asadullah Ali Andalusi and Jonathan Brown. So Jonathan Brown is a scholar, and they quote this hadith supposedly to show that Aisha had reached puberty. And they translate this here as, narrated Aisha, "I had seen my parents following Islam since I attained the age of reason, i.e. puberty." And they give this passage as the evidence that Aisha had reached puberty. And so they should know better, right? And when this happens, when it's actual scholars trying to say, "Oh, she'd reached puberty here," when it's just all she's saying is from the time I could remember things. Here, you don't just say, "Okay, this person doesn't know what he's talking about." Here, it really looks like they're being deceptive in order to keep Muslims from being bothered by the issue and from leaving Islam.
Yeah, and you can see why here in the last example, how they are somehow making a connection between memory, recalling things, and puberty. Maybe we should look into some medical research on that, since we've used DSM before. I mean, are you telling me that you cannot recall anything before puberty? Because I remember a lot of stuff that I've done, before that age myself.
Yeah, you'd need like a head injury or something. Like if you got a head injury right when you reach puberty, then maybe that's where you start remembering things.
Yeah, this is far-fetched, really. I mean, if medically speaking, I mean, you're making a claim that is not accurate scientifically.
Yep, so I have to say, all you Muslims who are using these hadiths to show that Aisha had reached puberty, you're using mistranslations, and I would say, in the case of this article from the Yaqeen Institute, flat-out deception.
Amen. Well, I hope everybody has been enjoying this series, and you can see why we are highlighting things for you from Islamic sources. And as you can tell, we're trying to be fair and balanced here. We showed you evidence that claimed that she did not reach the age of puberty, but now we're showing you evidence that claim she reached puberty. And even with this evidence, by the way, it's obvious to us that the translators most of the time are not capturing the Arabic. Either they didn't know what the Arabic meant, or, I hate to say it, there might be an agenda behind this. And the agenda is obvious, that maybe there's an embarrassment and they're trying to somehow reason, using the word there, with the readers to make it sound as if that's what the Arabic says. And unfortunately, they capitalize a lot on the lack of understanding of Arabic, or that the readers are not Arab in the first place. So this is the tragedy in all of this. Again, thank you so much, brother. Next episode, we will deal with more, evidence and topics related to this. Thank you, and have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Was Muhammad a pedophile? Modern Muslim scholars would say no, but the most trusted reference manual on mental disorders, the DSM-5, says he was. We'll give you the detailed diagnosis. If the idea that an old man is marrying a very, very, very young girl is something that will prompt you to think there is something wrong with this man, then my question is this: was Muhammad a pedophile? David, what say you?
Oh, yes. So we can end the video there if you want. I'll give you the answer. Yes, but this is actually interestingly, people think I'm super mean. You can go back to articles and so on and talks I gave from like 10 or 12 years ago, where I was actually telling Christians that we shouldn't call Muhammad a pedophile, because even though there's a common usage of the term where we say, you know, hey, he's attracted to little girls or something like that, he's a pedophile or something like that, there's a specific psychological definition for the term pedophile. And I had seen psychologists who defined pedophile as someone who is exclusively attracted to prepubescent children. And so, I mean, if you've read the Muslim sources, Muhammad was not exclusively attracted to prepubescent children. He was attracted to, I mean, women and girls of seemingly all ages. And so I was honest enough to say, hey, if this definition doesn't actually fit, then we shouldn't be using this term because it's just not accurate. Mm-hmm. So that's what I said back then. But notice, even though there were psychologists who defined pedophile as someone who's exclusively attracted to prepubescent children, notice we still want to say that there's something wrong with someone who's attracted to kids at all. Like, even if the person is attracted to grown women, if you're also attracted to prepubescent children, to prepubescent girls or prepubescent boys, you have a problem. There's something wrong with you. So what's going on there? Well, fortunately, now we have the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, also called the DSM-5. This is you're familiar with this. This is the standard, is this or not? This is the standard work right now in diagnosing mental disorders.
Absolutely, and this is the latest edition, because the one that I even studied before was the DSM-4. Mm-hmm. But they have done some modifications here to some definitions.
Yeah, so this is the standard work right now for diagnosing mental disorders, and they give the criteria for a mental disorder, and if you check the boxes, and you got a problem. So we're going to go ahead and read the criteria for someone with pedophilic disorder, someone who is a pedophile. But before we do, let's just recap the Muslim sources saying that Muhammad was sexually active with a prepubescent girl. So let's go back to these. In a previous video, we read Sahih al-Bukhari 6130, narrated Aisha, I used to play with dolls in the presence of the Prophet, and my girlfriends also used to play with me. When Allah's messenger used to enter my dwelling place, they used to hide themselves, but the Prophet would call them to join and play with me. So Aisha and her friends are playing with dolls in Muhammad's presence. Any Muslim who's reading that would wonder immediately why she was allowed to play with dolls when dolls are images and images are forbidden. But we have the solution right here. The playing with dolls and similar images is forbidden, but it was allowed for Aisha at that time as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty. So she was a little girl, hadn't reached puberty. Let's read another passage from Sahih Muslim. Sahih Muslim 33:11, Aisha reported that Allah's apostle married her when she was 7 years old, and she was taken to his house as a bride when she was 9, and her dolls were with her. And when he, the Holy Prophet, died, she was 18 years old. Why was she allowed to play with dolls? As we've seen, dolls are images, but it was still allowed if you hadn't reached puberty. You hadn't reached the age of moral accountability, so they let children play with dolls. And as we've seen also in Sahih al-Bukhari, number 5153, he ties it all together with what the Quran says. But notice the chapter heading, giving one's young children in marriage is permissible. So this is talking about giving children. We're recapping this for a reason. We're about to read the definition of someone with pedophilic disorder. Giving one's young children in marriage is permissible by virtue of the statement of Allah. And for those who have no monthly courses, i.e. they are still immature. So this is talking about sex with girls who have no monthly course. They don't have a monthly menstrual cycle. And it's talking about divorcing them after having sex with them. And it says that the iddah, the waiting period for the girl, so the waiting period before she can get married again after her husband divorces her. The girl before puberty. So this is clearly and indisputably talking about prepubescent girls, girls who haven't reached the age of puberty. So you marry a girl, divorce her, then she has to wait 3 months before she can marry another guy, all before she's reached the age of puberty. She can be married multiple times, all before she's reached puberty. And the quotation they give to illustrate this is about Muhammad and Aisha. So Muhammad and Aisha are supposedly examples of marrying and having sex with a prepubescent girl. So narrated Aisha that the Prophet wrote the marriage contract with her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years, i.e. till his death. So we've got multiple layers of issues here. So in order to get away from this issue, Muslims will say, she wasn't 9, she was older. We've seen, no, that doesn't work. She was 9. Then they'll say, but she had reached puberty. No problem there. She hadn't reached puberty. But then they'll say, well, yeah, it doesn't mean he was a pedophile. Well, let's go ahead and read the definition. Pedophilic disorder, according to the DSM-5. Here are the criteria. A, over a period of at least 6 months, recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving sexual activity with a prepubescent child or children, generally aged 13 years or younger. So it says, if you're having sexual activity with a prepubescent child or children, age 13 or younger. So that's a check for Muhammad.
A check, and also he was much longer than 6 months. At least it says she was 6, consummated 9. He has 3 years to think about it.
And so notice it's all the way up until 13. So yeah, he really just crushes that one. B, the individual has acted on these sexual urges, or the sexual urges or fantasies cause marked distress or interpersonal difficulty. It doesn't seem to cause him distress, but the first part of that, the individual has acted on these sexual urges. He certainly has. And C, the individual is at least 16 years old and at least 5 years older than the child or children in criterion A. So you have to, so in other words, they're not talking about a 13-year-old who's attracted to a 12-year-old or something like that. They're talking about someone who's an adult who's attracted to a little girl or a little boy. So Muhammad was in his 50s.
45 years older than her, when at least she was 6 years of age, has 3 years to think about it, married her when he was at least at age 54. So he was basically, that's a 45 years difference between the two.
So here you have to be at least 5 years older. He was 45 years older. So he's just crushing. He's just crushing these diagnostic criteria. But then after, and those are the criteria. So you have pedophilic disorder if you meet these criteria. So according to the DSM-5, Muhammad had pedophilic disorder, i.e. he is a pedophile. But then they say you're supposed to, as a psychologist diagnosing this disorder, you're supposed to specify, because there are different types of the disorder. You're supposed to specify whether it's exclusive type, that's someone who's attracted only to children, or non-exclusive type. So you're attracted to children and non-children. And then you specify whether it's attracted to males or attracted to females or attracted to both. And you can specify if it's incestuous. Some people are attracted to their own children or their own young relatives. So notice what we would say based on the DSM-5. This is the latest, most up-to-date authoritative source on diagnosing mental health disorders. We would say that Muhammad has non-exclusive type pedophilic disorder,
right,
and that he is, according to the DSM-5, a pedophile. So the answer, according to psychology, is yes, he's a pedophile.
What are the chances we're going to hear that this DSM-5 is corrupt?
Yes, they're going to wage jihad on psychology.
And now the sales of the DSM-5 just skyrocketed, so we do our part. Well, thank you, brother. I mean, it can't get any clearer than this, and I hope everyone is tracking with us. And if any of you are in the field of psychology or mental health, Please feel free to comment and let us know if we misrepresented anything in here. And disregard the idea of Muhammad, just talk about it. Generically speaking, is there anything that David just mentioned written in that reference book that is misrepresented or misquoted, or it doesn't apply in this case? To the rest of you, well, I pray that you will never deal with an issue like this, especially for you young women. You don't have to deal with issues like this, I hope, because indeed, if you are disturbed, I agree with you. It is absolutely disturbing, especially coming from someone who is considered to be the model for mankind. If this is the model for mankind, well, maybe we have picked the wrong model to follow. Jesus is the answer, and I hope you come to him. Thank you so much for following us. We are not done yet. There is more to come. This is Fadi. Thank you and God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Was marrying little girls the norm in Semitic cultures? If so, defenders of Islam are forced to use moral relativism to defend the actions of Muhammad. Today we're going to talk about this particular issue. Was pedophilia in the 7th century an acceptable behavior? David?
All right, and just so everyone understands what we're talking about here, a pedophile, according to the DSM-5, so the standard work in diagnosing mental illnesses, is someone who is over the age of 16 who's attracted to a prepubescent boy or prepubescent girl. And Muhammad was definitely engaged in sexual activities with a prepubescent girl. And I'll just read one passage from Sahih al-Bukhari. We've covered numerous passages in this series, but Sahih al-Bukhari, number 6130, narrated Aisha, "I used to play with the dolls in the presence of the Prophet, and my girlfriends also used to play with me. When Allah's messenger used to enter my dwelling place, they used to hide themselves, but the Prophet would call them to join and play with me. The playing with the dolls and similar images is forbidden, but it was allowed for Aisha at that time, as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty." So the reason Aisha was allowed to continue playing with dolls in the presence of Muhammad, when images were forbidden according to Islam and you weren't allowed to play with dolls, was that this rule wasn't applied to prepubescent girls. They hadn't reached the age of moral accountability, and therefore they were allowed to play with dolls. So Muhammad is, according to our modern understanding of the term, a pedophile. He's what we would call a pedophile. But Muslims very often say that, well, since it was a different culture, that we shouldn't judge. And let me give you two quotations from Muslims who are trying to defend Muhammad by appealing to what we would call moral relativism. So this quotation is from Maqsood Jafri. He says, "The Arabs practiced polygamy. In the wake of custom, the Prophet Muhammad married some ladies. Hazrat Khadija was 15 years older than him at the time of marriage. Most of them were his age sake. In his 50s, he married Hazrat Aisha, the daughter of Hazrat Abu Bakr, when she was just bloomed to youth. Hinting this marriage, some of the Orientalists charge Prophet Muhammad as a pedophile. It was not only the Prophet Muhammad who had married a young girl, but even the father of Hazrat Aisha, Hazrat Abu Bakr, had also married a young girl in his 60s. It was part of the prevalent Arab culture and custom, hence not to be taken seriously." So the defense here is, hey, even Abu Bakr married a young girl, it was common, and therefore we can't take this seriously as an objection to the perfect morality of Muhammad. One more quotation, this one's from Abdurrahman Squires, and who actually believes that she'd reached puberty, even though she hadn't. He says, the large majority of Islamic jurists say that the earliest time which a marriage can be consummated is at the onset of sexual maturity, meaning puberty. Got a problem because even the Quran contradicts that. And most Muslim scholars over the centuries haven't agreed with that. But he says, since this was the norm in all Semitic cultures, and it still is the norm of many cultures today, it is certainly not something that Islam invented. So he's saying it's just normal back then. So who are we to complain that Muhammad had sex with a prepubescent girl? How should we be able to judge him when he lived in a different time with different rules? Shame on us for saying that he was wrong and immoral. And I have to say, the reason I find this so amazing is that Muslims are actually appealing to moral relativism or cultural relativism here, which is that morality changes from culture to culture and from time to time.
What does that say about Allah and his morality?
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing because it seems that that Muslims are normally completely against moral relativism. I mean, notice, everything they condemn other cultures for, drinking or sexual immorality or something like that. According to this, we should be able to just respond, hey, it's a different culture, man. Who are you to judge? Mm-hmm. But they don't apply that. I mean, for Muslims who take Islam very seriously, they want to imitate Muhammad right down to the smallest detail, including how he went to the bathroom. Right? So he is the standard. We are all supposed to imitate this standard. And even though this was 14 centuries ago in a completely different part of the world, a completely different culture, completely different ways of doing things, they still insist, but this is the way we have to do things now. So this is not cultural relativism or moral relativism. But suddenly, when Muhammad is criticized, well, it was a different time and a different culture. We should all just ignore that. And notice, by the way, that Muslims will praise Muhammad and praise Islam when they're talking about practices that Islam abolished. For instance, they'll claim that it was a common practice to kill baby daughters that you didn't want to take care of. So female infanticide. And they'll say, you see, this was a common practice, but Muhammad came and he abolished that evil practice. Well, wait a minute. If it was a common practice and morality is just relative to your culture, then how can you condemn that culture for something that was common then, right? But notice how Muslims defend Muhammad. Hey, it was common to have sex with prepubescent girls, and therefore you can't condemn the practice.
But I'm confused because it always was thought that Islam came to fix many problems in the culture, like infanticides, for instance. Are you telling me Islam came to go along with things like this that are even worse than infanticides? At least the baby girl is dead. She's not suffering at the hand of a pedophile. Yet somehow Islam is okay with certain things?
Yeah, and that's definitely what it sounds like they're saying, that Muhammad came to make these societies and cultures better. He came to fix the problems. But notice the assumption here. The assumption is that sex with prepubescent girls isn't a real problem. It only seems like a problem to us because we're in a different time. But it's not a real problem like drinking or something like that. It's not a real problem. So what we can point out here is the idea that this isn't a problem is itself a problem, because Muslims today are forced into saying that it's not really wrong. It's just our opinion that it's wrong because we live in a different time. What are they actually saying? They're saying that it's not really wrong to have sex with a prepubescent little girl, even though we know there are all sorts of medical problems and so on that are associated with this, that having sex with a little girl endangers her, it endangers any future baby she might have. It's very dangerous, highly immoral, but they're stuck concluding that it's okay depending on your time and culture. And it's just complete complete inconsistency and hypocrisy to be the people who most frequently are judging everyone else in everyone else's culture. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, that's haram, that's haram, that's haram, that's haram. And then suddenly we get to an issue which is really, really bad, sex with prepubescent girls, pedophilia, something that we should all agree on. And suddenly, hey, who are you to judge? You can't judge another person's culture or morality. Very strange religion.
Yeah, David, how many times have you heard, or we all have heard, that Islam came to elevate the status of a woman?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what did they do? Allow pedophilia, basically ban adoption. How did he ban adoption? Lusting after the wife of his adopted son.
Mm-hmm.
Is that elevating the status of woman?
Nope.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And then if they complain about it, you smack and beat them into submission.
Yeah, that's a whole different story.
You smack them right up to their elevated status.
Well, folks, while we try to recover from this episode, hopefully you've been enjoying everything that we presented to you. As I stated before, the goal is for you to hopefully become more aware of these kind of teachings. If you're a Muslim, I am hoping that you are really stirred up right now to go and take a look at these evidence and resources that we provided for you, or given you the hadith number, the source, and so on and so forth. But our hope is that you will make basically an amazing decision in your life, but not only leave in Islam, but come into Christ, who have truly elevated the status of women, human beings, and reconciled us to God. With that in mind, I encourage all of you, of course, to share these with your friends, and be sure to subscribe to our channel and also to David's channel, Acts 17 Apologetics. Until next time, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Defenders of Islam say that Mary was young like Aisha when Muhammad married her, so what he did was okay. Was Mary young like Aisha when she married Joseph? No. The argument is completely invalid. The topic that we are going to discuss today has to do with whether Mary was young like Aisha or not. Meaning, was she the age of Aisha when Joseph, the carpenter, married her? And of course, with me here is our brother David Wood to address this objection. David, you hear this objection all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So how can we respond to it for the benefit of our viewers, of course?
Yeah, and think about the reasoning here, right? So people point out that it's a problem that Muhammad had sex with a prepubescent little girl. And the response is, but Mary was young too. Right? And in philosophy, that's called the tu quoque fallacy. The tu quoque means, and you also, right? Mm-hmm. The reason it's a fallacy is because it doesn't address the issue, right? If we
just make a comparison, that's all.
If we conclude, based on the evidence, that Muhammad was a pedophile, it wouldn't matter if someone else is a pedophile, right? And they don't just do this with Mary. They'll do this with other people in the Bible. They'll say, oh, but this king so and so back in the medieval period married a child and so on, and they don't seem to get the problem, namely that, okay, if Muhammad was a pedophile, it's completely irrelevant to that topic whether king so and so was a pedophile, or even if whether Joseph was a pedophile. It's irrelevant. What you'd be saying is, okay, Muhammad's a pedophile, and so was this other person. So that's why it doesn't answer the question. That's why it's considered a logical fallacy. Either Muhammad's a pedophile or he's not. Either he had sex with a 9-year-old girl or he didn't. Either she hadn't reached puberty or she had, right? So these are the issues there. It doesn't make sense to point somewhere else. But this often gets brought up. Mary was young too, and multiple problems here. It was possible in ancient Israel to marry a girl who was 12 years old. You don't hear of anyone marrying 9-year-olds, right? So that's not a thing. Even in the Talmud, they would list 12 years old. And you had problems if you were trying to marry someone before the age of 12. So what they'll say is, well, maybe she was 12 then. And the reason it's maybe this or maybe that is because we have no source on the age of Mary, right? If you had no idea, what the sources say, and all you know is, well, it was possible to marry a girl of 12, and you say, well, therefore, maybe they married her, maybe someone married her then, maybe Joseph married her then. It's all hypothetical, right? When we talk about Muhammad marrying Aisha when she was 6 or 7 and having sex with her when she was 9, that's based on evidence. We're saying this is what your sources say. Our sources do not say that she was 12 or 13 or 14. She could have been 18 as far as our sources are concerned. So what you'll find is that Muslims will go to later apocryphal sources from like the 5th or 6th or 7th century, where they start to give ages for Mary and Joseph. And so there is one that will say 12, there's another that says she was 14 and so on. And then you'll get one that says that Joseph was 90. And no one considers these reliable historical sources. They're much too late. And we know why they were coming up with ages, because in Catholicism, the question arose, why did Mary remain as a virgin? So according to Catholics, Mary remained a virgin. So the question was, well, after Jesus was born, why didn't Joseph have sex with her then? And so apocryphal sources started saying things like, well, he was really old. Joseph was 90. So he just wasn't interested in sex. So these are sources that people came up with in order to respond to objections that were arising about various positions. But again, no one takes these, and not even Catholics take these as serious sources on the history of Mary and Joseph. They're much too late. So at the end of the day, we just have no reliable source on the age of Mary. We do have some things to consider here, right? So here is something from the Bible. So I'm going to read a couple of verses from Luke chapter 1. We're going to see something interesting. So Luke chapter 1, starting at verse 39. So this is Mary coming to visit Elizabeth. So in those days, verse 39, in those days Mary arose and went with haste into the hill country to a town in Judah, and she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. And when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, the baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit, and she exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." Now notice, she's blessed among women.
Yeah, meaning older, mature in age.
And this is identified as from the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is identifying Mary as in the category of women.
Right.
Why is this relevant? Well, in the Bible, we know there's a different category from women. There's a category of children. There's a category of children. And we see Jesus using this category. So in Mark chapter 5, this is the story of Jairus, whose daughter is sick and at the point of death. And so he goes to Jesus because he hears that Jesus can perform miracles. So he goes to Jesus to get Jesus to come heal his daughter. But as they're going, someone already comes and says, "Sorry, she's dead." Now, let's read. While he was still speaking, so Jesus heals another woman along the way. While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." So Jesus calls Jairus' daughter the child. The child is not dead, but sleeping. And so it says he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. So she's repeatedly called child, 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 child. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha kumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. So child, 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 and he calls her little girl, child. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. You were 12 years of age, you were still in the category of child.
Yeah.
And a little girl. Mary is blessed among women. She's in a different category. So we have no source, no reliable source that tells us that she was 12 years old or 13 years old or something like that. All we have to go on is that she's called a woman in a time period where if you were 12 years old, you were still called little girl or child.
Yeah.
So the point is there's no basis for concluding that she was as young as 12 or 13 here. Sounds like she was in the category of women, so she was fully mature. So the entire argument from Muslims, their entire response, apart from being a logical fallacy, is just a bogus comparison. We know that Aisha was 9. We certainly don't know that Mary was 12 or 13. It looks like she was certainly older. But there are other issues here. Notice, even if she'd been 9 when Joseph married her, what in the world would that mean? Is Joseph the pattern of conduct for Christians? Is Joseph the pattern of conduct and we're all supposed to emulate Joseph? No, Muhammad is the pattern of conduct for Muslims. It really, really matters what he did. If all of a sudden we found some lost source and it showed that Joseph was an axe murderer, guess what? Christian doctrine doesn't depend on Joseph, so it wouldn't matter what he did. So even if he had done something like that, it wouldn't affect us. And even if we go beyond that and we say, okay, some girls as young as 12 were married off in ancient Israel. And even if we said, okay, suppose Mary was actually 12. Notice, there's a big difference between 9 and 12. A 9-year-old girl could possibly be starting puberty, although as we've seen, Aisha hadn't reached puberty. But she could, right? By the time she's 12 or 13, she could be completing puberty. So it's a 3-year difference, but those are, for many girls, the 3 years of puberty, the 3 years where their hips widen and their breasts develop. So there would be a world of difference between a 9-year-old girl and a 12-year-old girl, even if Mary had been 12. And when we factor in that it wouldn't matter because we're not talking about a guy who's the pattern of conduct in Christianity, and the fact that she sounds like a grown woman according to our sources, and the fact that it's a fallacy, we see how desperate Muslims are to respond to this issue. And just think about it. There's no basis for concluding that there's anything pedophilic about this, but they'll actually try to work that into the source, saying, oh, she was a little girl like Aisha was. Notice what they're doing. They're saying, hey, if you're criticizing our prophet because of what he actually did, if you're speaking the truth about our prophet, we're going to lie about people in the Bible. We're going to lie about your Bible in order to attack you. And that just shows you what kind of religion we're dealing with.
That's right. And also just to point out that in chapter 3, Surah Al-Imran, or the House of Imran in the Quran, verse 42, it seemed like it's allude to Maryam or Mary as a as a woman, I should say, did not use a phrase that denotes her as a young girl. The Arabic word nisa typically is used of mature, older women. So what I'm trying to say is, if the Muslims are correct about her age, then the Quran failed miserably to even elaborate further on her age. And that's basically what we deal with all the time. Thank you as always. And hopefully next time we will continue with these arguments and we will address yet another issue concerning the relationship between Aisha and Muhammad. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and share this with others as well. Thank you and God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel Sira International and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Trusted Islamic sources confirm that Muhammad married a little girl. To deflect attention from Muhammad's relationship with Aisha, Muslims say that Rebecca was 3 years old when Isaac married her. We expose the bizarre reasoning they use to make this desperate claim. We have addressed a number of attempts by our Muslim friends to refute or to try to justify such behavior. Today, we're going to address yet another attempt to refute the fact that such behavior was unacceptable. For instance, our Muslim friends will point out to the age of Rebecca in the Bible, and they would say, wasn't Rebecca even younger than Aisha when she got married? Or at least there was a proposal to marry her. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn to David. David, what do you say to that?
Well, I would, here as always, I would say, read the passage, you liars, right? So this is actually one of the most disgusting responses. So we point out that according to Islam's most trusted sources, Aisha was 6 or 7 when Muhammad married her, and she was 9 when he consummated the marriage with her. We're not making that up. It's not a situation where we say, we have no idea how old she was, but let's just make a claim. We're claiming that Aisha was a certain age based on the evidence that we have. So this is according to their sources. But once they argue that, no, she wasn't 9 years old, and we show that that's a lie, and then they say, but she had reached puberty, and we show that that's false, then they start having to come up with different kinds of responses. And just as we have with the example of them saying, but wasn't Mary, the mother of Jesus, young like Aisha? No, she wasn't, not according to any reliable source we have. But they'll try that, and they also use that same approach, which again is a fallacy. It's called the tu quoque fallacy. The tu quoque fallacy is when, in order to avoid answering an objection, you just say that you've got the same problem or something like that. Notice that doesn't answer the issue. So if Muhammad is a pedophile, according to Muslim sources, it's irrelevant to say, but so-and-so is also a pedophile. Okay, well then there would be 2 pedophiles, right?
That's right. I mean, that doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, that doesn't fix the problem that Muhammad, the pattern of conduct in Islam, is a pedophile, and that it's still causing problems for little girls around the world today. So that's why it's a fallacy. But what's most disturbing about this is that Muslims are just basically making stuff up. They're going to people in the Bible where the age isn't given, and they're giving some sort of absurd reason for claiming that the girl was young, and then they're claiming it as fact. And so this one is especially disturbing because Muslims will actually say Rebecca was 3 years old when Isaac married her. Notice, Isaac is a prophet according to Islam. And so they're actually accusing a prophet of marrying a 3-year-old girl in order to deflect attention away from Muhammad. So defending Muhammad, it's not just that it causes them to defend and justify pedophilia. It causes them to attack people in the Bible. So you're talking about Mary, the mother of Jesus, and they'll accuse Joseph of also being similar to Muhammad. And then they'll accuse Isaac of having sex with a 3-year-old. So their belief in Muhammad is actually causing them to attack numerous people in the Bible that they claim to respect. Oh, we respect Mary, the mother of Jesus. We respect the prophets in the Bible. And then this is how they treat them, all in order to deflect attention away from their prophets. So the actual claim is that Rebecca was 3. And it's very simple to just say chapter and verse, because the Bible nowhere gives an age for Rebecca. So you say chapter and verse, and they will have no idea where it comes from, because all that happens is someone will say it, one of their apologists will say it, and then they'll all pass it around as fact instead of actually knowing what the argument is based on. So I've actually asked repeatedly for Muslims to defend this, and the actual defense that they give is the most ridiculous thing in the history of humanity, apart from many of their other claims. But so here's how they get an age. Because normally if you want an age and it doesn't give an age, you kind of have to piece it together. You have to say, right, okay, well, this person was this age here and this age over here, and this person was this age, correct, and then you kind of do some math and you get to a certain age. So in order to get an actual reference point to start, okay, here's how old someone was at this point, or here's when this person was born. They need a starting point for Rebecca, and here's the claim that they make. This is how they defend it. In Genesis 22, book of Genesis, chapter 22, you have the story of Abraham and Isaac, right? When they go up the mountain. Right. And at the very end of that chapter, the very end of that story, we have this passage where Abraham gets some news from back home. So
something about his brother.
Yeah, Abraham gets news from back home, and we read in verse 20. Now, after these things, it was told to Abraham, so he gets some news. Behold, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor. Uz, his firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel fathered Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. Right? So here's the argument. Abraham gets news from back home about who had kids and this and that. Because he's a long way away by this point. So you would only, it's not like we have email now,
that's
or,
right,
or even like the post service.
That's right.
You have to wait till travelers come by and they say, hey, I actually know your family from back home and I can tell you what's going on there, right? So their argument to get this young age of Rebekah is, well, it says right here, he heard that Bethuel fathered Rebekah. So they argue, right now is when Rebekah's born. So start right now. This is when Rebekah is born. It doesn't say this is when Rebekah is born. It says this is when Abraham hears the news from home. Following that reason, you'd have to say all these other people were born
the same
right
day. It's
then.
amazing,
yeah,
man.
all these children are born the same day.
Wow.
So notice that's like insanely ridiculous reasoning. It shows how desperate they are they're so desperate to defend Muhammad, they'll just even make up absurd reasoning like this. But what I want to point out here is since there's no actual age for Rebekah that's given, if you just read about Rebekah when we first encounter her, it's really clear that she's not 3. It doesn't say how old she was, but it's really clear that she wasn't 3. So this is later on when Abraham sends his servant to find a bride for his son Isaac. He sends his servant, and his servant gets to the well and prays. And
for a sign.
Say, I don't know what to do here, so God, could you have, people are coming out, I'll ask for a drink of water, and if someone says, yeah, and I'll take, let me water your camels too, let that be a sign that this is the person you've chosen. So we read in Genesis 24, starting at verse 15, before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her water jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very attractive in appearance. Notice, the young woman, the young woman. Right. The young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. She went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. She said, drink, my lord. And she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. So Rebekah draws water for 10 camels. Now, I just went and searched how much can a camel drink? And the first entry that pops up, which is from a university, a typical camel can drink 53 gallons of water in 3 minutes. Right? So let me get this straight. Muslims want to say this was a 3-year-old. So this 3-year-old is coming out to the watering hole carrying her jar,
right,
that, you know, she uses to draw water for the family, to bring in water for the family. That would get pretty heavy with water. And not only is she the one who has to go out for water, she waters 10 camels. Now, let's suppose they weren't entirely super thirsty. Let's say they just drank, 25 gallons each. This 3-year-old drew 250 gallons of water,
right,
for someone. So notice the argument that she was 3 is absolutely insane. And I would have to say, anyone making that argument, I don't trust you, you're a liar. There's no way you could actually interpret the text that way and not be trying to deceive us. And the only passage that we have that would give us any indication of how old Rebecca was specifically calls her a young woman.
Right.
And she is clearly doing something that no 3-year-old in the history of humanity could do. I have a 3-year-old right now. He would not be drawing 250 to 500 gallons of water to take care of someone. And I certainly wouldn't trust him to be going out and doing tasks like this.
That's right.
By himself.
And it's just amazing, David, like you mentioned, out of desperation sometimes you try to just reinterpret things to suit your agenda. And it's the same passage that you're picking from, tells you the rest of the story. How come you just only take part of it and ignore the rest of it? And also, if Rebecca was born when Abraham got the news, man, that must have been the fastest way for him to get the news. It never says that he was waiting for someone to bring the news. It just happened that he heard this was happened. And what about the rest of those that were born? It's a miracle in itself that many people were born all at the same time. And didn't it mention that the same wife had more than one child? Wow, she has triplets? That's amazing.
It was way more than that, yeah.
Well, folks, you see the problem, you see the dilemma. I understand why our Muslim friends do this. I mean, I would be embarrassed myself if I have to deal with this. So I can appreciate where you're coming from. But let's tell the truth. Let us stick to what the scripture is saying, and let us just face the dilemma. It is a dilemma. It is a problem. Let's just call it what it is. Thank you, David. Mm-hmm. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Hopefully we will catch up with you next time with yet another issue related to this topic. This is Fadi. God bless you. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.